Question will not be read out, however, you will receive a response in writing. For those in attendance, each question received will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the Executive Management Team. Responses will also be provided in writing following the meeting. I'll also have a 5-minute cap for questions, so if all your questions haven't been answered within that time, you will receive a response to those other questions in writing. Okay, questions from Mr. Jason Schramm. Question 1. Why are questions in writing and the answers not given to councillors prior to the meeting so that our representatives, the councillors, can fact-check answers or ask questions of officers in relation to the answers given and to at least make sure that the answers given remotely relate to the questions asked? Response from Manager Governance and Communications.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Councillors are provided with responses to questions in writing in advance of the meetings.
Question 2, relating to item 10.5, sale of Brew Street, consideration of submissions. In point 2 of the recommendation, it states, Council acknowledges and notes the verbal comments made in support of written submissions at the Submissions Committee meeting held on the 1st of September 2021. Nowhere in this agenda report does it make mention of the verbal submissions or any of the issues or points raised in it. Why have the verbal parts of the submissions not been addressed and omitted from this report? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Mr. Schramm. In the report to Council, a response to the relevant issues identified in both written and verbal submissions has been provided. Council have heard submissions, which will obviously inform their decision making.
Question 3. How can Council sell the land prior to the environmental cut-off wall being built? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council is not obliged to construct the cut-off wall or other protective measures prior to selling the land. However, these protective measures are required to be implemented before residential development of the land can occur.
Question 4. If the cut-off wall is to be built by Council, would it not then have to get a new valuation of the site after this wall is constructed? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. The valuation of the land has considered the impact of the cut-off wall being constructed.
Question 5. If Council is to retain ownership of the section of cut-off wall land and have it subdivided off from the residential land to be sold, would it make the advertised sale of land the wrong size and also the valuation incorrect, as the actual land would be smaller? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. This was clearly communicated in the expression of interest documentation, with prospective purchasers having knowledge of this. The size of the land and valuation of the property are both accurate.
Question 6. If the sale of the land is not finalised until the cut-off wall is built, how will Council pay for it? What will it cost to build? And if it takes longer than 6 months to complete, would Council then need a new valuation on the land? As per the Local Government Act states that a valuation must be current within 6 months. Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council is yet to determine if it will construct the cut-off wall itself. The cost of the construction is yet to be determined. If Council did determine to construct the cut-off wall itself, the intention is to pay for the construction through proceeds of the sale of the land. Council would still need to determine, though, how it would cash flow the project. Council would only proceed with construction of the wall if it was to be accompanied by a sale of the site that recovers the cost. A valuation is required to be obtained within 6 months of the actual sale of the land.
Question 7. The sale of land by councils is usually done to generate other income other than rates. If Council breaks even or makes no money from this sale, wouldn't this parcel of land be more value as public open space or recreation? And how would you know the answer to this without presenting costs to the public or preferred outcomes or doing any form of community consultation to gauge the expectations of the community in relation to the future of this site? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. The sale of council-owned land is typically done to dispose of assets that aren't required to provide a service to its community. The land is zoned general residential and appropriate for residential development. Having available residential land available will provide a range of benefits to council and our community. Council continues to work through the costs and potential revenue from the proposed sale of the land. The report in today's Council meeting agenda is to establish whether Council intends to sell the land. The method of sale and financial outcomes sought from this sale would be confirmed by Council through later resolutions once these processes are finalised.
All right, moving on to questions from Mr Luke Hume, Apollo Bay, regarding agenda item 10.1. Question 1. Is the Council aware that the original requested trading hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. was considered by the neighbours to be friendly and in keeping with the tranquility that we share living in this rural conservation zone? Is the Council also aware that extended hours before and beyond 9 to 5 p.m. for a licensed restaurant unrelated to conservation and detrimental to the rural conservation zone would not have received neighbours' approval? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, thanks for the question. The concerns of objectors about the potential impact of the application on their amenity will be considered by councillors at tonight's meeting. Councillors have received copies of all submissions to the application and have heard verbal presentations from objectors at the Planning Committee on 10th of November 2021.
Does the Council think that allowing a licensed restaurant soliciting walk-in custom that is not ancillary to the primary activity, that this would set a precedent that would lead to the demise of the rural conservation zone and negatively affect the lives of its residents? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, the application must be considered on its planning merits and does not in itself represent a precedent for other applications in the rural conservation zone. Council would consider all of the issues raised by residents when making a decision on the application at today's meeting.
Question 3. If this permit is approved and the actual noise and light pollution is found to be unacceptable, what is planned to be done to resolve this? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
If approved, the amended permit would contain a number of conditions that seek to address potential amenity impacts. Council planning compliance staff would investigate any concerns of residents and seek to address these where possible to the extent that is reasonable within these conditions.
Question 4. This change of use and operating hours is being introduced to combat the effects of no international visitors due to COVID-19. Once international travel is restored, do the owners plan to revert back to the original use and operating hours? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, the applicant has sought the amendment to the permit without any limit on the time frame for an approval. Council must assess the proposal on the basis that it is a permanent change to the permit.
Question 5. I see that Wildlife Wonders has just been named in National Geographic's top 25 places on Earth to visit in 2022. This is a remarkable achievement, and having supported this project from the start, I'm happy for the team. I must reiterate that my only concern with Wildlife Wonders is the changes new planning permit will bring, and not what the existing business operations are. This announcement will ensure the park gets a boost in daytime visitors, something it truly needs to remain open. Referring to the attached groundswell of support on social media, it is apparent that plenty of people intend to visit the park. The permit application has been made to address the effects to business that the pandemic has had by allowing increased opening hours and opening up another revenue stream with the restaurant. Given this announcement and the fact that international travel is set to return shortly, is this planning application now redundant, and if not, why not? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, Council is required to consider any application submitted on its merits, and only applicants can decide if they no longer wish to pursue a proposal. A decision must be taken on the current application on its planning merits, notwithstanding the change to international travel. Thank you.
We'll now move on to questions from Mr Alan Nichols, Apollo Bay. Regarding agenda item 10.1. Question 1. The planning report written in June 2021 refers to economic climate affected by COVID being central to the change of use application and for the alternative income stream of a licensed restaurant. Where in the Colac Otway planning scheme does it state to support changes in land use due to COVID impacts? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Mr Nichols. Whilst the loss of trade from international visitors arising from Covert has been identified as a reason for seeking changes to the permit, Council can only consider the planning merits of the application against the relevant provisions of the planning scheme and planning legislation.
Question 2. Is the Council aware that local residents and neighbours agreed as part of the original planning permit to operating hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, and now an extension is sought from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m? Does Council understand why locals and neighbours feel that they have been totally betrayed and that trust has been abused? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. The concerns of objectors concerning the proposal are well understood. Council would consider these concerns when it considers this item at today's meeting.
Question 3. Does the Council have any insight into why the original application states operating hours of 9 until 5 p.m. with dawn and dusk walks unmentioned? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. It is common for businesses to evolve over time in the way that they determine to operate. The applicant has sought approval for this change, and Council is obliged to consider its appropriateness on its merits, including the concerns of objectors.
Question 4. Is Council aware that the original plan shows the cafe situated on the southern elevation of building, and therefore any noise emanating from the terrace of the cafe would have been partially buffered by the building? The cafe terrace was also situated inside of the line of the predator-proof fencing, so suggesting its activities were for the benefit of paying guests. Now we are faced with a restaurant on the northern elevation of the building, in visual and audible range of my house and front garden, and that the restaurant is to solicit trade unrelated to conservation or nature walking experiences. Does Council fully understand the level of dismay and disappointment within the group of neighbours and some local residents that we feel betrayed and let down by the applicant and the planning process system? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. The amendment application seeks planning permission for those changes, including the proposed licensed restaurant being open to the public. Any applicant can apply to amend a proposal after a permit has been issued, and Council is required to assess any such changes on their planning merits.
Question 5. The planning report submitted by applicants states the need for an alternative income stream. As there are at least 9 vacant shops and blocks in the township and the desire is now to have a restaurant, wouldn't the applicant be better advised to make use of one of those sites within the commercial zone and not further disturb the wildlife and residents of the rural conservation zone? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council must assess and determine the submitted application on its planning merits.
Now we move to questions from Mr David Hume, Apollo Bay. I think relating to item 10.1. Does Council consider that a fully licensed restaurant operating dawn till dusk in conjunction with a nature walk experience is a conflict of land use? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Mr Hume. Officers have recommended support for the application. Council would consider objectors' concerns when it makes a decision on the application at today's meeting.
Question 2. Is Council aware that the existing cafe is operating independently and not ancillary to the nature walk experience as the permit stipulates? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council has not been aware of any breach of the issued planning permit and has not received any complaints that would have led to the matter being investigated.
Question 3. What is the correlation between an interpretive wildlife centre and an alcohol licence? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Licences to serve alcohol are granted to a range of land uses, as evidenced elsewhere in the Shire and balance of Victoria. Council is obliged to consider the appropriateness of this use under the current amendment application.
Thank you. Now we'll move to questions from Michelle Hyatt, Apollo Bay. Question 1. As Wildlife Wonders has not been trading previously during the intense holiday period of Christmas through January, does the Council think that it would be appropriate and prudent for all to witness how trading within the existing permitted use actually develops before any amendment is considered? Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor, and thanks for the question, Ms Hyatt. As with any application submitted, Council is required to consider the acceptability of the proposal on its merits. Council cannot delay decisions on planning applications in the manner suggested, and the applicant would have the option of taking the matter to VCAT on the basis of Council's failure to determine the matter if it did so.
Okay, now we've got questions from Mr Jeff Cook, Colac. Question 1. Are councillors confident that there is sufficient staffing in number and expertise in the Environment and Sustainability Department to complete the Climate Change Action Plan by June 2022? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, yes.
Question 2. Given Council's legislated responsibility to ensure engagement with the community, what process will Council use to engage community members, particularly those with specific knowledge and expertise in writing the Climate Action Plan? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, Council has recently undertaken extensive community consultation in preparation of the Community Vision 2050 and the Council Plan 2021 to 2025, which showed strong support from the community for environmental protection, environmental sustainability and climate change action that is within the remit of Council, as well as supporting our community to take action. The Climate Action Team also recently presented to and briefed Council about their detailed report titled A Call for Action for a Biodiversity and Climate Action Plan for the Colac Otway Shire, which will also help inform the development of the Colac Otway Shire Climate Action or Climate Change Action Plan. Once a draft plan is prepared by Council officers early next year, Council will seek feedback on the draft plan via public consultation from the community, relevant public and government organisations and agencies, and other stakeholders in accordance with Council's community engagement policy.
Question 3. Is Council aware that the Climate and Biodiversity Action Committee or Task Force, as suggested by the Climate Action Team, is based on the community-led Climate Emergency Response Plan of the Borough of Queenscliff, which has recently won the Climate Council's Cities Power Partnership Climate Award and is easily adaptable to Colac Otway Shire? Response from General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, thank you for bringing the Borough of Queenscliff's approach to developing their climate emergency response plan to Council's attention. With the wealth of resources and examples available to Council from other local governments, government agencies, scientists and the information provided to Council by community groups such as the Climate Action Team, at this stage, Council feels confident that the Climate Change Action Plan can be developed by Council staff without the need for a similar task force or committee.
Thank you. Okay, so now moving on to questions from the gallery. Can I have a show of hands so that I can get an understanding of how many people would like to ask a question? Okay, to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions, I may need to limit the number of questions from each person to 2. Then once everyone has had an opportunity to ask their initial questions, and if time permits, I will invite further questions. Please note that whilst we do our best, it may not be possible to answer all questions without notice tonight. If this is the case, they will be answered later. Before we proceed, I'll remind everyone in the gallery that you must ask a question. No preamble or introduction to questions will be permitted. If you do not ask a question, you'll be asked to sit down and the next person will be invited to ask a question. So I think Mr Bob Knowles had his hand up. So, Bob?
I did, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone. And I had a little preamble, so I better not speak to that. Better go. I'm just here as a neighbour and not as the President of the Chamber of Commerce. And we're neighbours of Wildlife Wonders. Our property fronts the Great Ocean Road. And it used to drive me crazy when people stopped on the side of the road to take pictures. It's particularly annoying when the surfers pull up at the surf point and park their cars everywhere, and it's particularly annoying when people stop at the sign just up from Wildlife Wonders that says the Great Ocean Road's most southerly point, and take selfies there as well. Needless to say, these activities don't have opening hours. They happen all the time. This stuff used to annoy me until someone pointed out that the Great Ocean Road, from the Great Ocean Road Regional Tourism Group, that the Great Ocean Road itself is not a thoroughfare, it's not a means, it is a destination. All of it. But when people stop at Wildlife Wonders, they're not on the roadside or taking a photo, they're pulled off the road into the car park that's discreetly located. And when they go to Wildlife Wonders, they're behind a purpose-built mound. So my questions for Council are, as you consider the overwhelming community support and the incredible economic and environmental value of this not-for-profit enterprise, are you going to deny visitors the same glass of champagne that balloon tourists enjoy elsewhere in the state, and visitors to wineries, obviously? Are you going to prevent quiet, guided groups of people from visiting at times when there are actually wildlife wonders to see, because in the middle of the day they're all asleep? And are you going to imagine that loud music and debauchery will be permitted in a precinct established for the nurturing and protection of some of the most vulnerable species? Are you going to let the unproven concerns of a few cripple the experience for the very, very many? I don't expect an answer.
So there's a few
except
questions.
later.
I'll probably just answer that question in that a decision on Wildlife Wonders amendment to their planning permit is subject of a decision at council tonight. So we'll have to wait for that decision of councillors. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Jason Schramm.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors. Jason Schramm, Colac. Considering this is relating to item 10.10 on the agenda, considering council has recognised that a series of project and contractual governance failings contributed to the circumstances that it finds itself in, it's blowing $1 million of ratepayers' money, has the staff member or members responsible for procurement, finance and governance been held accountable for blowing $1 million of ratepayer money, or have they been terminated, as would be the minimum expectation of this community, or has the matter been referred to IBAC or the municipal inspector for an outside investigation?
I might ask the CEO to respond to that.
So, through the Mayor, thank you, Mr. Schramm, for your question, and completely understandable that this is a matter that would raise considerable concern for you and members in the community. We're very aware of that. The matter has been looked at before my arrival here, and a range of actions have been taken. The ones that you're specifically referring to would really be HR matters that I'm not about to discuss in this forum. But the councillors have certainly been raising this issue with me, and I have given a commitment to undertake a further review to make sure that all of the possible learnings can be identified, all of the corrective actions to avoid this in the future can be implemented, and to just give that reassurance to councillors, which is appropriate, that I believe all action that should be taken was taken. That's a matter that I'm still working through with the councils, and there will be discussions about that with the councillors. I expect there'll also be further, information to the public about what we have learned and what we're putting in place, but I'm not going to discuss HR matters specifically here.
Second question.
Your second question.
In the recent financial plan adopted by the council, it states that council finds itself in a possible financial cash shortage in years to come. A reason given by officers in that report was due to past council decisions not to slug the ratepayers at the full cap. Would council consider an amendment to the 10-year plan to state that financial mismanagement and not presenting all the facts to councillors to make informed decisions by council officers has led to council finding itself in a possible cash shortage in future years, using the $1 million of ratepayer money blown on one project, the two-way radio, as an example?
CEO.
Yeah, thank you again through the Mayor, Mr Schramm. I will take on notice your specific reference to the financial plan because I don't recall that wording being in there, but you may have read it more recently than me. But I think what you're highlighting is the need for council to have a look at all of our operations, not just revenue and rate capping, but actually having a look at all of our operations to make sure that we are using every dollar of council's and the ratepayers' money effectively, and that includes good governance around project and contract management, and there is a commitment to do that. It's something that, the councils have been very clear around that expectation with the new CEO, and I take that on board, so there will be a focus on project and contract governance as well.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions from the floor? No? Okay. All right, we'll move on then. Thank you. I note that there are no petitions or joint letters received. Okay, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to declare a general conflict of interest in relation to item 10.1, pursuant to section 127 of the Local Government Act. I received a disclosable gift in the form of an election campaign donation from the Apollo Bay Chamber of Commerce, and they've made a submission in relation to item 10.1. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to the confirmation of minutes. I propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the council meeting held on the 27th of October 2021. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hart. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? No. Okay, all those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.1. PP 258-2016-3, Part 465 and 475 Great Ocean Road, Apollo Bay. Amendment to allow restaurant use and liquor licence and to alter the hours of operation and maximum patron numbers. The purpose of this report is to consider an amendment to allow restaurant use and liquor licence and to alter the hours of operation and maximum patron numbers. I note that Councillor Costin, you have a declaration of interest, so we'll wait for you actually to leave the room. Thank you. I don't know where he's gone, but anyway. Okay. Do councillors have any questions of officers regarding this item? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question relates to VCAT decisions in relation to restaurants on rural conservation zones. Is Council aware of any decisions which might give a clue as to the how VCAT views this sort of a restaurant in a rural conservation zone? I understand you may have a couple of those.
Through you, Mayor, we're aware of a couple in the last couple of years, so 2021 and 2020, where licensed restaurants were proposed within the rural conservation zone. In both cases, VCAT allowed those licensed restaurants. They placed focus on the amenity of neighbouring residents as part of their considerations, but noted that a restaurant is a use which can be allowed in the rural conservation zone in its own right, and considered it appropriate in both those recent cases.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for that answer. I think you've possibly answered what I'm going to ask, but I just want to clarify, did those VCAT ones, did they have a environmental business associated with the restaurant, or is VCAT determined that you could have a restaurant even without that? How does that fit with the rural conservation zone?
The planning scheme actually allows a restaurant to be permitted in its own right. There are no conditions in that. Obviously, the purpose of the rural conservation zone is taken into account when looking at an application, but there is no requirement placed in the planning scheme on the consideration of a licensed restaurant.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. I've just got a question probably similar to Councillor Hart, but it's probably a little bit beyond the rural conservation zone. I was just interested to know, are there any other circumstances, either within or outside of VCAT, where you have a nature-based tourism function of the business that has then expanded into one where you have similar patronage numbers, you have a liquor licence, and you also have more extensive visitor hours built into that, the fundamental nature-based tourism program? Are there any other circumstances around the state that we've seen that sort of progression to?
Through you, Mayor, and I do apologise, I can't give you specific examples necessarily now. I do know that there are other examples where certainly the serving of food, cafes, licences would be associated with such uses in farming zone and rural conservation zone. So it's not something that's necessarily uncommon. You also get it at wineries and places like that, obviously, where there have been expansions into licensed restaurants on sites like that.
And thank you. And just an additional question. Have there been any studies, I suppose, at least internally, that look at the potential impacts to, as has been mentioned, the fragile ecosystems and species that exist within the site, and how additional visitor numbers, under the circumstances that may or may not evolve with a liquor licence, may impact on the particular species or ecosystems present?
Through you, Mayor, there hasn't been any specific study on that. Clearly the restaurant is actually within the building and not within the area that's enclosed by the predator fence, so there wouldn't be direct access onto that part of the site.
Thank you.
Councillor McCracken.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could just outline for us, I understand that there are some changes that have been put forward since the last time this matter came before us, and I was wondering if you might be able to outline what we're considering today, given that there has been a number of changes, please.
Through you, Mayor, as requested by Planning Committee, we have had some discussions with the applicant, and the applicant has put forward some suggested changes that they would be happy to accept to the draft permit conditions. They've suggested additional visitor and patron number limitations as part of that. So while still proposing, and I don't know if we've got... So in draft condition 5, they have suggested that limited numbers between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m, so there'd effectively only be one tour group allowed in the first hour of opening. Between 7 and 9 a.m, there would be a maximum of 120 patrons on site. And they've also suggested that in June, July and August, from 5 to 9 p.m, that a maximum of 80 patrons could be present on site at any one time. They have maintained a request that the maximum patron numbers be 190, so that's not suggested as per condition 5 up there. In addition, in condition 8, they have made some changes to restrict external live music between midday and 7 p.m, so not earlier in the day. They've also suggested that outdoor dining cease at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And in addition, they've suggested some controls over the sale of liquor. So alcohol could only be served till 8:15 p.m. on any day, with the normal liquor licence allowance to have a 30-minute grace period where customers can finish drinks after 8:15 p.m. But they've also suggested that control be imposed to limit the consumption of liquor prior to midday to people who are actually on tour, in tour groups and visiting the actual Wildlife Wonder Centre. They've also put forward in condition 23 a suggestion that within 3 months of the changes being made to the restaurant patron numbers and hours of operation, that the submission of an acoustic report is required, and this is a suggestion that they have put forward. So they would have to engage a suitably qualified person to undertake an acoustic assessment. That report would have to be submitted to council, and if there were any breaches of the permit conditions as a result of that assessment, recommendations would have to be made on how non-compliance would be addressed, and that would subsequently have to be implemented within specified timeframes.
Would it be fair to say that apart from the change from 190 to 170, everything else would have been suggested by the applicant? Is that fair to say?
Yes, everything that was in the blue text that we've just reviewed and that I've spoken to was suggested by the applicant.
Except the 170?
Yes, the applicant had suggested or maintained a number of 190 patrons as previously considered.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm not sure what number it was, but at point D, it talked about lower numbers Australian Eastern Standard Time at 7 p.m. So what happens at daylight savings time? And does that need to be stated? Or is it 8 p.m. daylight savings time because that's 7 p.m. Australian? What's the intent with that clause?
The intent is solely that limitation would apply in Eastern Standard Time. There isn't the same proposed restriction on the outdoor dining in daylight savings.
Can we see that, please? That clause?
Have you got a question?
Can I ask, through you, Mayor, the CEO, do you really think that point D makes that clear that that doesn't apply at daylight savings time? Another interpretation is that it is the equivalent of a 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. I mean, I'm not convinced that D is as clear as it could be, if that's what the intent is.
So through the Mayor, Councillor, you're asking for an opinion rather than information. So I'm sorry, can I ask again, Blaine, for you to restate the intent here? And then I'll give my opinion.
The intended restriction to 7 p.m. requiring outdoor dining to cease at 7 p.m. is solely put forward by the applicant for Eastern Standard Time. So normal hours are still proposed by the applicant for AEDT.
Well, I think the condition is clear. I think that it's going to be a discussion in compliance because I think that it might raise some questions in practice. That's the issue. But I think the condition is clear. So as I understand it, the condition is stating that outdoor dining would cease at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time where that applies, and what I heard is outside of when we are operating in Victoria under Australian Eastern Standard Time, daylight savings time, it would not apply. So I think that's clearly written. It may not be the it may not be the outcome that everybody thinks.
Are there any further questions? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor White, are you moving the motion What are you moving? As presented up here? With the changes, Councillor McCracken just asked the question, they have been gone through with the changes as suggested by the applicant. But there has been a change from to be clear, from a maximum of 190 patrons to 170. Is that your intent? Is that the motion? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken. Councillor White as the mover.
Thank you. This has been really challenging for this council, a really challenging item to consider. There's been numerous different presentations and different considerations. It's a major decision, and myself, I've taken a lot of time to read the material and reread the material and really get my head around it. The Great Ocean Road is a major attraction, and I think Mr. Knowles pointed that out in his question and presentation. It's not unusual that a great attraction like the Great Ocean Road would have a proposal for a facility such as this. I don't think that anyone would see that a great attraction should have these sort of facilities, and the Great Ocean Road is one of those. As a councillor, I want to see the region grow and thrive, and I want to support small businesses to do that. And as such, we need to support Wildlife Wonders to succeed. The local community has got many and varied opinions, and we've heard a lot of that, and we've read their submissions and objections. There's been 36 support and 11 objections. The objectors, of course, are people who live close by and are going to be more impacted. But there is a lot of support for this at the same time. There's been a lot of discussion about, this is a second sort of go at doing this, and I guess from where I sit, businesses do change, grow and develop as they understand what the demand is, what they're offering and what they want to value add. And I think Wildlife Wonders, they want to value add to the visitor experience. The material I've read is very convincing around the wildlife and wanting to present that sort of experience and be respectful to the conservation zone and the integrity of what they're trying to do. I guess the key issues of numbers, noise, traffic have been discussed at length, and there's been a lot of suggestions to modify and how we could come to some sort of consensus or arrangement that would suit everybody. And the applicant themselves have put forward a number of changes to their original application, and I think this is really demonstrating that they want to try and alleviate some of the concerns and anxieties of the local community. And I know, having talked to a few people, that is difficult to do, and we don't have a crystal ball to really know the impact what these changes might have. But they are showing that intention and that desire to try and alleviate those concerns. I guess for me, one of the things that they've included is the offer to do an acoustic assessment within 3 months, and that they've agreed that once they get an audit and if there are recommendations made through that assessment, they have agreed that they will implement those recommendations. So I guess that helps in putting in a safety net there to try and reassure that the community that they are serious in wanting to not impact the amenity of the neighbours as much as possible. The outdoor dining must cease at 7, although there's been a bit of a discussion about what Eastern Standard Time and whatever, but that 7 p.m. is up there. Reduced numbers and the consumption of liquor is limited from the original. So I think the endeavour to make it work and try and recognise the concerns and anxieties is there, but I think as a council we've got to support local business, small business, trying to provide a really good visitor experience, and I want to see these businesses thrive and grow. It's a very comprehensive permit. There's 60 conditions, and that we need to support that. We've heard that permits for a licence in these sorts of areas are not uncommon, and that VCAT has recently heard some and let the permit stay. So I'd just like to take on and congratulate the work that's been done here to give us a really thorough understanding of what's before us so that we can make a considered decision.
Thank you. Councillor Potter as the seconder.
I'll reserve, please, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor McCracken, you opposed?
Yeah, I did. And look, I do agree with Councillor White that this has been a really challenging matter to grapple with. And it's easy to see why, you know, there are two passionate sides with, you know, different views on this. And, you know, whichever way you go, someone's going to be affected badly. So, yeah, it is a really big challenge. I think one of the things that hasn't been noted is that the objectors aren't arguing against the fact that there's an attraction there. I think they went around and supported the original attraction with good intent. And I think most of the adjacent landholders actually supported it. I think what the real issue is about the change in the nature of the land use from basically, you know, running wildlife tours to adding a commercial element to it and the various impacts that that commercial element might have. So that's basically the change that most of the objectors, from what I understand, are concerned about. And I guess it makes sense for the adjacent landholders to be concerned because they're the ones that are most impacted. I see that there are others that do support it, but they're not really impacted that much because they are quite far away from the location. One of the justifications used for this change in permit is Covert. And to me, I struggle with that somewhat because we haven't even had a full year of operations to see what the full impact of COVID has actually been. So for that one, I think there's a little bit of a struggle on that point there. And that justification has been used to talk about increased numbers, a change in hours, and the changing of the liquor licence arrangements. So I really do struggle with that. This matter is about a planning matter. It's not about considering the economic benefits of it or not. And, you know, you can think about that, but we have to consider this on a planning basis. So, you know, that's what we're looking at here. And even environmental outcomes, that's not what planning, you know, that's not what this matter is particularly about. As much as it might be a good environmental outcome, that's not what the basis of this is. I think the objectors do have reasonable points that they've made, and it does give me some heart to see that there have been some small changes, but I've got to emphasise that the changes are very small. In fact, nearly everything that's been put in this change has been suggested by the applicant except for one small part, which is the change from 190 to 170 in the capacity. I think it should be a lot lower personally, but that's not what's in front of us. And part of the reason is because I think it's fair to say that there should be a limit on the different distractions and whatever you want to call it, the impacts from that increase in numbers. Can I have 20 more seconds? Thanks. It's a bit rough, isn't it? So yeah, basically I think, look, we've been considering this most from an applicant's point of view. I think we need to take a broader perspective and consider the objectors in this, and also the fact that they were here long before this establishment was, you know, started, and that they were originally supportive until the use changed. And that's the key factor here. They're not against it, they're just against this particular change. I'll leave it there because I'm out of time.
Does any other councillor wish to comment? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for all the submitters and in-depth work that Council has put into this. It clearly has been a lengthy process. I myself have definitely taken, I've acknowledged the view that it is a planning matter. Of course, it is a planning matter. I also think there's scope for a broader discussion around this particular topic, though, and that is some of the benefit that either perceived or factual benefit that may come out of this, and I think that is the point that I'd like to make. I think the reinvestment that would undoubtedly come as a result of this would have a far greater benefit for the broader community, for the Otways and the fragile ecosystems and the species that exist within it. Now, it's possible that is out of scope, but it's certainly one of the strong factors that I'm looking at it through. So, to that end, I support this motion. I think broadly it will have a really strong outcome for the community and the nature-based tourism, which is fundamental to this subject. So I sympathise with some of the people that have called me, and I thank them for their time. Speaking to Alan Nichols only this morning, and I do fully acknowledge your concerns and the concerns of other people in the community. But on balance, and I think that's what we're trying to reach, I definitely reach the conclusion that supporting this motion before us right now is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I'd like to thank the many people who've made submissions on this particular planning matter. I'd also like to acknowledge the significant conservation work at Wildlife Wonders. The Rural Conservation Zone is concerned with environmental outcomes, so that I feel that is relevant, and I think you will find the planning scheme it is relevant factor in considering sites such as these. I found the VCAT decisions relevant to the discussion in that it would appear that a restaurant could be established on a rural conservation zone, potentially even without the significant environmental works and the trail that Wildlife Wonders have. So whilst it's great to see that the restaurant aims to support the conservation works, there's other instances where restaurants are permitted that don't have the same degree of commitment, and we've seen that in some of those VCAT matters. There's no physical works involved with this. I acknowledge the neighbours are concerned about noise and traffic, and we're given the role of trying to balance all these different concerns. I think the altered conditions that we went through earlier are a significant improvement and are trying to balance the concerns, particularly of neighbours, and particularly draw attention to the noise report that Councillor White touched on. I think that's in condition 23, and the limits on the liquor licence in clause 8, particularly that the sale of liquor prior to midday is limited to patrons in a guided tour group. I do think that 8D is a potentially ambiguous clause, but nobody else seems to think that, so I'll support the resolution. But gee whiz, I think some people could spend a lot of time discussing 8D. But you know, smarter minds than me have said I shouldn't worry about that, so I'll support the resolution moved by Councillor White.
I'll just make a quick comment. Councillor Poppett, can I speak first? Yeah. I'll just make a quick comment that, and thank everybody who has made the trip twice to Colac around to attend the planning meeting and now the ordinary council meeting regarding this item. I too have had discussions with a number of the objectors. And but I will note that there's a lot of goodwill between the objectors and the applicant, and I think that was sort of highlighted in the question from Mr. Hume, where he commented on Wildlife Wonders receiving being in the top 25 places, National Geographic. And I think that it shows that there is goodwill, or there definitely was goodwill, and he also said in his question that he's happy for the team. Like that is a great achievement. But what councillors have before them and officers have assessed is an amendment to a permit, and that has been assessed against the planning scheme, and that assessment is that it fits. And when councillors are looking at making a decision on that, they're the things that we are looking at against the planning scheme. And Councillor Hart also made mention, which I thought a lot about, were the VCAT decisions, and Councillor Hart requested those. And from those decisions and that information that has been supplied, and as Councillor Hart has mentioned, that this type of operation fits within that rural conservation zone. So that's why I will be supporting the amendment, and I wish the applicants luck. And I do thank them very much, particularly for the acoustic assessment that will be done. I think that's an important element, because particularly one of the close neighbours I spoke to was very, very concerned about the noise, and I think that is not a cheap exercise to undertake, and they don't have to undertake it, but they have offered it, and I think it's been a good addition. Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I found this difficult to deal with, and I think I was the councillor who moved that we adjourn it from the planning committee meeting for a couple of weeks to take it at this meeting, to allow perhaps for some discussions in the meantime. And I'm pleased they have occurred, and I thank the applicant for making some changes to their application, and I note that the councillors have made a further small change. When I first saw this, I was really concerned that the focus of Wildlife Wonders had shifted from flora and fauna to kangaroo steaks and Shiraz. I didn't see necessarily the link between a restaurant and a liquor licence and tours that highlight our native flora and fauna, and the risk to them and the education of the public about what we're so fortunate to have in Australia. But I've got my head around that, and I do agree that to perhaps have a glass of champagne with some canapes after an early morning tour or a dust tour would really add to the experience, and would really encourage people from out of town to stop in Apollo Bay and go and experience what we offer in this country and this part of the state. You have to wonder why, perhaps when this first come to us to authorise Wildlife Wonders, that the opening hours were put to us as they were, because most locals would know that a lot of our wildlife is nocturnal, and that's the best time to see them is at dawn and dusk. However, that's what we have in front of us now, and I think that makes sense. I share the objectors' concerns, especially around noise, and especially around for the most immediate neighbours, buses, vehicles, slowing down, stopping, accelerating back out onto the Great Ocean Road. I think it's a concern, and I do share that. But I think in the overall interests of the broader community, that I will support this application as it is before us.
Thank you. Councillor White, you have a right of reply.
Just briefly, thank you, Mayor. Just to say, I think without the changes, the initiative would not would be struggling to thrive and grow, and I think we owe it to our region and to the community to give it every opportunity to do that and to give that great visitor experience. As Councillor Mayor Hart pointed out, Hanson pointed out, it has been assessed against the planning scheme, and it came up with those results that the permit is very valid, and it's been very thoroughly researched and put before us. So I'd just like to, in the end, say thanks to all the community who did have input. I acknowledge that there are concerns. I'm hoping that they can be alleviated through the acoustic report and some of the other changes that have been made. So thank you.
Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item is carried 5-1. I will now get Councillor... Can someone please get Councillor Costin? Dig him up. Okay, now we... Oh, where did Councillor White go? Oh, there she is. Oh, good idea, get a drink of water. Okay, now we move to item 10.2, the Council Covert Assistance Package. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with the opportunity to determine further covert assistance to the community and businesses with the distribution of the balance of the Covert Community Business Support Fund. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor McCracken, then Councillor Potter.
Yes, thank you. How do we come to have this money available to distribute to the community? What was the process?
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor McCracken. The fund was set up as part of a process at the beginning of the COVID event, and it was set up by Council. Ian, can you comment how much we originally... I think we allocated originally around $900,000. This was a balance of those funds that weren't allocated and carried over into this year.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I notice in what proposed there's no reference to street furniture fees. Is there any plans in the future to consider any potential assistance to businesses in relation to that?
Through the Mayor, yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Potter. So Council's been allocated significant funds from the state government through what's called the Outdoor Activation Fund. That's $300,000 in total in 2 stages, so we're certainly looking to utilise the first stage of that funding to cover street furniture fees.
Are there any other questions? Oh, Councillor White.
Just very quickly, the process for businesses or recipients to get the funds? Can you just quickly go through the process?
Through you, Mayor. In terms of the process, so typically annually we would send out invoices for health registration fees. So that's to food businesses, beauty salons, tattooists, and like types of businesses. We wouldn't send those invoices out. So rather, we would just do a transfer from this fund into that operational budget. In terms of lease relief, again, we wouldn't be invoicing for the lease that would normally be expected.
There's no application process that the recipients have to go through?
Through the Mayor, that's yes.
CEO?
Through the Mayor, can I just add to what Mr Surin has said? So there wouldn't be an application if this recommendation became the motion. There wouldn't be an application to get the financial benefit, but I just want to make sure businesses know they still have to register. So it would be waiving the fee for registration. They would register as per the normal practice. I just want to make sure people in the community understand we'll still support the businesses with inspections and all of those important things.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor McCracken, is it to be seconded? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor McCracken as a mover.
And thanks, Mayor, I guess I probably feel I should move this one because I was the one, Ian's grinning there, who moved to quarantine this money in the first place so that we could consider its future use. And I'm glad to see that it has gone to a future use that will be of benefit to a lot of the businesses in our community. So I hope that as many businesses as possible can take advantage of this, and hopefully as COVID hopefully winds down, we won't need to see any more support like this available because hopefully COVID will be gone.
Councillor Potter, is the seconder?
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, I'm pleased to be able to support this, and I think officers and councillors working together to try and mitigate some of the horrible effects of COVID on the community, because this is not just a business fund, this also helps some community groups, it's helped some sporting groups and some charity groups that are busy preparing meals and handing them out to less fortunate in the community, and we do have them. So I think this is a good proposal, and thank Councillor McCracken for moving this, and I'll be happy to support it.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd just like to add, really, that I think this is a really good opportunity to provide for what has been a really difficult time for not only our community in Colac Otway Shire, but the broader community and for people who would come to our region to enjoy it. I think it's also important to acknowledge that probably quite a few of us, having tried to, under the banner of COVID, and as we came into this new council, used COVID as a means to demonstrate how we'd affect the community coming into council. I know I certainly did. I campaigned on it, and I think this is just one of a number of areas where we've already demonstrated that we can benefit the community from a relief package like this. So it's good to see that we're continuing to do that. As Joe said, hopefully we won't have to do it for too much longer, but I've got a feeling that the effects from COVID may linger for a little bit longer than what we think. And I'm always supportive of trying to ensure that people who are less fortunate and have the means in which to live well within our region. That's all I have to say.
Does any other councillor wish to comment? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.3. Council Policy Review 20.1 Environmental Sustainability Policy. There's a motion underneath, I think. Nothing's moved, no motion yet. The purpose of this report is to present the reviewed and updated draft council policy 20.1 environmental sustainability and related environmental sustainability framework for council endorsement and adoption. Do councillors have any questions of officers? And we've got Dora Novak online. Are there any questions? No? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. The second motion, the lower motion, with the amendment shown in blue. Thank you.
Is it to be seconded? Councillor Hart. Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Costin is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I take great pleasure in moving this motion for this environmental sustainability policy. Our last policy was last updated in June 2012, I think, and hasn't been reviewed since, so it's long overdue. Environment has been a major issue, become more of an issue since 2012. This amended policy has been through the Audit and Risk Committee. It includes now includes a definition of environmental sustainability, which means acting in a way that ensures our future generations have the natural resources available to use and to live an equal, if not better, way of life as we do now, our current generation. So this is for our children's children. When we looked at this in April this year, we requested an environmental sustainability framework be attached, and that has been attached and looks quite good. The draft policy has been out for public exhibition. Didn't receive any submissions, so to me that means it's been a well-prepared draft policy. So I'd like to thank the officers and move the recommendation with the minor changes, which are just a typo, and the addition that we note our soon-to-be-prepared Colac Otway climate change action plan. Sorry, I was looking at the second dot point. So that includes another dot point in our framework to show the climate change action plan, which we propose to prepare by June next year. Thank you.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think Councillor Costin has summarised it up quite well, but I'll just draw attention to page 112 of the agenda, which gives a good summary of the framework of this particular policy. And I think it was important to add the climate change action plan, which I note was included in part of the council plan, which we adopted last month. So, and I believe this policy was put out before that time. So this is just a couple of alterations in ensuring that that's captured, and as Councillor Costin said, correction of a typo that just left out a few words.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell. Oh, sorry, I don't know who. Councillor Bell, then Councillor White.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to add, and firstly say, Dora, well done. I think a lot of work has gone into this. I just, as an aside, I've seen a lot of these frameworks and documents being put together over the years with an intention to create a strong benefit for the environment and sustainability purposes. I've seen, as a result, those documents not being fully utilised. They've been used sometimes as a means in which to politicise or create almost controversy within the context in which it wasn't meant for. I don't anticipate that happening here. I'm glad that we have it. I just want to reiterate that I hope we can use it for the right purposes, which is to support environmental sustainability, obviously for future generations. I think we all stand to benefit greatly from that, and as I said, I fully expect that to be the result, and thank you again for that work.
Councillor White.
there's a lot of thank yous going on, but I do also want to thank the officers for this work. I think the document is really solid and succinct, and I think it's a really strong document, and I think it's something we will be able to refer to very easily to remind us of our responsibilities. At the moment, it's becoming more and more urgent that we really put some focus on our environment. I particularly like the sustainability principles, and I really urge the community to have a look at those and to hold us to account and to ensure that we do work with this document and make it live and work for our community. Thank you.
Okay, does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I will now call for a vote. Councillor McCracken. Sorry.
Sorry, Kate, I won't be too long. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see this come through as well. I note, sort of along the lines of Councillor Bell, that there's a lot of road maps and strategies and plans. I hope we don't get caught up in the paperwork and actually start to implement some of these things, because it's all well and good to have the paperwork and the justification behind these things, but I feel sometimes around here we sometimes get caught up with getting the paperwork and looking at nice and glossy without sometimes implementing it as we ought to. So yeah, I hope it does go forward, and look forward to actually seeing some work being done.
Councillor Potter wants to say something.
Well, I do now, Mayor. I wasn't going to, but look, I echo all the thoughts, but just have to tidy up from my point of view. Councillor McCracken's perhaps words. I think this Shire has done a lot of good work in this space, and I think we've been leaders, and I see more good work ahead. Totally agree about glossy reports and all the rest of it. They can sit on shelves. And I don't like the politicising of this issue. It's a real grassroots issue that we can all play a part in. So I hope the focus of the Shire remains on that which we have been doing, and implementing this policy and moving it forward.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.4, the Quarterly Performance Report, July to September 2021. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with the Quarterly Performance Report, July to September 2021. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor McCracken.
You might be able to guess what this one's about, Tony, but I was just wondering why hard waste is an emerging risk in this report.
Through the Mayor, and thanks for the question, Councillor. Essentially, it's an emerging risk on time factors relating to the hard waste service. We have been concentrating over the last few months on the purple bin rollout, and that's been an incredible success, and we'll bring some data to Council on that shortly. But hard waste is a key factor in our resource recovery and waste management strategy. So we're committed to doing it. It's intended to be funded from the Waste Management Reserve, and I think councillors will see that early in 2022 we'll ramp up the activity on this, and we'll certainly keep councillors updated on progress. But our intention is to deliver the service in this financial year.
You got me thinking, Tony. I just wondered, and sort of in light of the last agenda item, is it part of the waste management strategy? Has it been included in that? Because that obviously goes to the climate change thing that we're talking about, but in the report, yeah, I'm not sure if it's part of it or not.
Now, through the Mayor, my memory is that it was included in the resource recovery and waste management strategy as one of the key activities that we were looking to deliver to the community.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question relates to the planning applications received to date, and there's a report there on page 121. It appears that we have more planning permit applications than the same time last year. Is there any particular area? Is that just one particular area, or is that broad across the board? Can we have a general comment perhaps about the type of that have prompted this increase?
Through you, Mayor. Look, it is general across the board. What I would like to inform councillors is that we had an increase last financial year of around about 25% increase in planning applications, and then this current year we've had another significant increase. I think it's around about 25 to 28% as well. So we're certainly seeing lots of interest in development in the Shire, which is fantastic for our economy.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to that point, Mr. Surin, given that economic activity increase, how are we going for staff in that area to facilitate those applications so that people can start digging holes?
Through the Mayor, look, it is having an impact on our planning team because it is a significant increase in planning applications. So we're certainly doing our best. We're also looking at methods of finding efficiencies within the team or within the processes. In terms of strategic planning, we do have a vacant position in that area that we're actively trying to recruit for at the moment. So it would be great to try and find a strategic planner to help us out, particularly with that residential land development.
Are there any other questions? No. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor White. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McCracken. Okay, Councillor White as the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got a frog in my throat today. I just wanted to say thanks for the report, and it's a really comprehensive snapshot for councils and gives a really good indication of the breadth and depth of projects and initiatives that are going on at any one time. I think the way it presents does give us the ability to have an overview of what's going on and to hone in on particular areas like Councillor McCracken. One of his big areas of interest is that hard waste, and it gives you that snapshot and ability to ask those questions. I think also it highlights the areas of risk which are really important for council to understand and to enable us to ask questions. It also enables a level of accountability that we can use this tool to discuss areas of concern and issues with the council officers. So yes, I'd like to commend the report. I also like the inclusion of the CEO report. I think that's new, and that also gives a little bit more depth to the report. So thank you.
Councillor McCracken. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and I would like to thank the people who have prepared this report. I think it is of interest and good news to see the increase in the planning applications. I also note that the council's doing a lot of work on strategic planning with the Colac precinct. Some people will be familiar of being involved in the early discussions around that precinct. And I draw attention to page 142 on the agenda, where the vested benefits index is there for the superannuation fund, the defined benefit superannuation fund. Might not be very exciting, but it's good news that it's on the right side of 100%, because as this council will know, there's been various times when the defined benefit super fund has bitten council and ratepayers to the tune of millions of dollars. So that's good news. Keep your fingers crossed there. So I'd encourage the people to have a look at the report, Mayor.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Councillors, we might just have a 10-minute break and come back we'll come back in 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, councillors, we might make a start. Okay, now we move to item 10.5, Bruce Street, land sale, consideration of section 223 submissions. The purpose of this report is consideration of submissions under section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989 for the proposed sale of 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was wondering if the council would be able to put up page 156 of the agenda, because my question, excellent. My question relates to precisely which parcel of land, which area that council's propose or considering selling, approximate area if we know, and what the balance of the land is, the significance of that, and approximate area and whether that's likely to be sold or not.
Through the Mayor. So the land that Council's looking to sell is 36 to 52 Bruce Street. So that's the area on that map hatched blue. That's around about a bit over 4 hectares. So that is vacant land. It has never had any use. So there is another parcel of land at 2 to 34 Bruce Street, which is around 8.6 hectares, which is the former landfill site. There are another couple of parcels of land at McGonigal Street and Clark Street which make up the balance of the former landfill site, but they're certainly not in question for this decision.
Yep.
Thanks, Mayor. So what's council planning to do with the approximately 8.6 hectares of former landfill site? What would people see being developed there?
Through you, Mayor, at this point in time and for the foreseeable future, there wouldn't be any development of that site as it's a former landfill site, so we will just continue to monitor it.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Just in relation to point 4 on the recommendation, I find it a little bit unclear given that we're going to, or we have resolved to sell the land. It reads, it notes that a decision on the sale of the land will be considered at a future council meeting. Does that mean how we're going to sell the land or for how much or all those sorts of details? Is that what that sentence means?
Through you, Mayor, yeah, that's correct. So tonight's decision, as per point 3, is about council determining to sell the land. Point 4, the intention of that, and it may need to be slightly reworded if councillors wish to do that, is about the logistics. So who it is sold to would be and how much would be a future decision of council.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, when you're ready, Mayor, I would like to move a different resolution which is basically the same conclusion, but it's magically appeared on the screen.
Are there any other questions? No? Okay, so Councillor Hart, you're the mover of this motion. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Potter? Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to thank and acknowledge the submissions that have been put in on this process by the public. There's basically a couple of different steps with local councils selling land. One is that we have to advertise the intent to sell it and the public get an opportunity to make comments, and that's what's occurred so far. And we have also got an expression of various expressions of interest. What we're deciding tonight is in response to the submissions, and I do think that after considering those, that we should go ahead and sell the land subject to suitable conditions, which could be price, whether or not there's social housing involved. It could be how quickly it could be developed. But the actual sale of who we sell it to, that will be decided separately and at a separate council meeting. I think it's worth noting that there may have been some confusion from the advertisement in that it's only that section of blue-coloured land on that page earlier, which we were told a minute ago was approximately 4 hectares. The 8 hectares or so of rehabilitated landfill is not being sold and will have to be held and monitored for quite some time to come. So this, if we support this particular resolution, we're saying, well, yes, we plan to sell this land, but we need to get more details on an actual sale. It's not a blanket tick. Obviously, price and other conditions of sale are something that we would have to consider to get the best value for the ratepayers.
Councillor Potter, the seconder.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, back in May, Council flagged its intention to consider selling this property or to sell this property, invited submissions to that, and we had 6 submissions, I think. These were opposing the sale or opposing the sale with the inclusion of social housing or the level of social housing, and contained some criticisms of the process. I understand their point of view of the submitters, and I thank them for the submissions. We did back in May include a desired outcome of 15% of blocks of land available for social housing. And whilst I argued against that level, I supported the motion, and I agree with one of the submitters saying that this is high, but with a chronic shortage of social housing in the Shire has an opportunity with this sale of land to do something and to show the community that we're prepared to do something. It's not the remit of Shire to provide or solve the social housing crisis. Clearly that is the responsibility of the state and federal governments, and I think clearly they've taken their eye off the ball. Having said that, we do have a chronic shortage of land availability in the Shire and a chronic shortage of affordable housing for workers, houses for family and for retirees, and the sale of this land provides us with an opportunity to try and address that. So in considering the submissions, I thank them. The views have been heard, but I'm looking forward to the next step, Mayor, if this goes through to securing the sale of this land and seeing some outcomes.
Yeah. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in... the item's carried 7-0. Okay. Now we move to item 10.6, key worker seasonal housing local law exemption. The purpose of this report is to consider the use of General Local Law Number 2, Part 4, Section 55 to 57 to facilitate temporary worker housing. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Was there a small amendment proposed to this that we discussed earlier to review? There it is. Thank you. It's the only question. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillors, the officers...
Sorry, Mayor.
Oh, Councillor Potter.
Yeah, I was missing earlier in the day, Mayor, so I haven't had a chance to look at 8 or 9. I'm just wondering whether, in relation to paragraph number 8, whether officers could explain how that advice is going to be provided, what form is it going to be in, and who provides it?
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Potter. Point 8 is to define a process that happens for virtually every permit that Council currently has anyway in terms of pre-application meeting advice. For example, we can do to a business for a planning permit. It effectively says that we will meet with a business and they can present a site to us and we'll let them know if there's any issues with that site prior to them actually advertising for a job vacancy or formally approving for a permit.
Are there any other questions? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Costin. So you wish to move the motion up on the screen? Yes, sir. Okay. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Okay, Councillor Costin is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. This is really just administrative. We have a local law which allows us to issue permits, and we can issue those permits for key workers we need over the busy holiday season in the coastal towns within our municipality. Our coastal towns have a particular problem with affordable housing, and particularly housing available for workers over that summer holiday period. And because of the location of those towns, we find it, those workers find it almost impossible to commute to Apollo Bay, Wye River, Kennet River sort of things. So it's this proposal provides some guidelines around the issue of a permit for short-term worker accommodation, and we've never had an application, so it's good that we've got some guidelines that we can follow to issue those permits. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to compliment staff on their work on this. This, I guess, fell out of the Apollo Bay Housing Task Force and other internal discussions between councillors and officers, attempting to address the critical nature of lack of housing for workers in Apollo Bay. This is not the answer, it's not the panacea, but it'll help temporarily. I hope it works. I'm concerned that there may be a little bit of potential for rorting here and there. I hope that's not the case, but this is good work, and I'll be very interested to see how it plays out over the summer period in providing some accommodation options for businesses to secure employees for what I hope will be a very, very busy Christmas school holiday period.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Whilst I echo the comments of the previous councillors, and I do thank the officers for the work they've done on this, I do draw attention, though, that whilst this is titled as a local law exemption, what's really happening is I don't really see it that way. The local law already allows this to occur. This is just setting up the permit process. So while that's an important process and will hopefully help with the immediate issues down at the coast in particular, in a sense, this is working within existing local law. This isn't changing the local law. It's simply setting up the permit process within the existing local law.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay. Now we move to item 10.7, the Winifred Nance Kindergarten Play Space Upgrade Grant Proposal. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement to apply for a grant to redevelop Winifred Nance Kindergarten's play space. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Mayor. Firstly, I'll flag that I've got an alternative or a different motion that I'd like to move. Secondly, what is the capacity or maximum usage of the play space at any one time? I guess that goes with what's the capacity of the kindergarten?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. At any one time, the capacity is 33 children. Both 4-year-old and 3-year-old kinder is 15 hours a week. So in terms of programming, you can obviously enable a lot more than 33 kids to get through the space, but at any one time it's got a capacity of 33.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. What's the current state of the equipment in the playground as it is, and that life expectancy or usefulness of that equipment?
Through you, Mayor, the play space will need to be renewed in the short term, so in coming years. It's not a contemporary play space that's expected or required for an early years facility, such as a kindergarten. The typical lifespan of a playground is somewhere between 20 to 25 years. This one's meeting the end of its useful life, and we believe this is an opportunity to renew the playground at no cost to council if the application is successful.
Are there any other questions? Councillor White.
Can you tell me a little bit about how the expectation of play spaces has changed and what a contemporary play space, the elements of that are now and the benefits of that?
Thank you for the question. Through the Mayor, there's been substantial change in the way that play spaces are developed and the design of spaces, particularly in an education setting such as a kindergarten or a childcare centre. They've really moved away from fixed off-the-shelf play equipment items to facilitating more imaginative play and recognising that different children have different needs and may respond more, say, to tactile type play rather than typical climbing and jumping activities. So these spaces now look very different. They're more like gardens with a range of materials and plants, as well as a mix of play equipment to really cater to the diversity in children and to stimulate what's been proven to be enhance their early education through that type of play.
Councillor McCracken and Councillor.
Thanks. I note that the indicative budget's not in here, but it's okay to talk about that. Is that correct? Yep. What do we get for $75,000 or thereabouts for a wet play area?
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question. $75,000 roughly is an allocation that was allowed not just for water play but for nature play broadly. So that would include, say, you could get an off-the-shelf type element that has troughs and things like that and a pump that kids operate that facilitates water play, or a sort of a creek bed type arrangement that the water flows through, but it would potentially also incorporate other types of nature play, which might be sand and rocks and other materials. So it's a combination of nature and water play.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Just in relation to that topic, with the budget and components of it, is there scope for officers to keep an eye on that and to swap things around, or try and get perhaps value for money, or there's a perception in the community, for example, Memorial Square play space has really come along, cost a lot of money, and we need to be conscious of value for money. Do officers have a role in perhaps casting their eye over specific items to try and make sure we are getting value for money?
Through the Mayor, yes, absolutely. And officers have been involved in the early concept development and the consultation with BCYF and explored a range of different options between different cost limitations, so an upper and a lower. There's sort of allocations for different elements within a play space, and we've very much already had discussions about working to that cap. And still achieving value within the available budget. And that's been a really good way of exploring what the priorities are for the educators in that space. So throughout the further phases of design development into the detailed design and construction type documentation, officers are part of regular reviews of that too. And the aim is always to try and get the best value for the available budget.
Councillor Costin, then Councillor White, then Councillor McCracken.
Thank you, Mayor. If I've got the figures right, the cost if we get the grant for $300,000, the cost to council over the life period is $2,000 a year. Cost to council, $2,000 a year, and the rest of the cost would be covered by the kindergarten operator. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor. There are some costs to council, and we've indicated that they would be in the order of $17,000 per year. The majority of that would be renewal. All of that would be renewal.
I was just looking at the maintenance cost.
The maintenance costs.
Yeah.
So BCYF, as per the licence agreement, are required to maintain the play space. Our costs are essentially, there is some hard infrastructure costs, maintenance costs that we are required to meet, but that's outside the play space. It's really about doing an audit for the play space in terms of how it meets Australian standards.
So the maintenance cost to council then is small because the operator will pay for the majority of the maintenance cost. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, that's correct, yes.
Yeah.
Councillor White.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Councillor McCracken's put up a change to restrict the grant to $235,000 with $10,000 allowance for water play area. Is that a water play area? I've got no idea myself. Is that realistic in the research that you've done and the work that you've done to build the concept plan? You've obviously done a lot of research around this. Would that enable us to get the outcome that we're after?
Through the Mayor, no it wouldn't. The $10,000 would probably get us the actual service connection for the water, but I've been involved in the delivery of a range of water spaces that are low cost and high cost, and the bare minimum really would have to be around $30,000 at least, but without going into the detail, $10,000 doesn't buy a lot on the ground for water play.
Yep.
It's a follow-up question while I'm on the go. In terms of the maintenance and following on from Councillor Costin's question, that would not, am I correct in assuming that would not be a new cost, that there are already maintenance costs involved in managing all the kindergartens that would be built into our budget? So it's not a new cost. It might be a different, or it might change. And I would have thought maybe with a new equipment, it should be less for early years while the equipment's still new, and maybe increase as the equipment gets older?
Through you, Mayor, that is correct that we... So there is an existing playground that needs to be maintained at the moment. I guess if we look at council's playgrounds, much of the maintenance cost is around soft fall, so topping that up, making sure it meets certain depths, which is the requirement of BCYF. So they would have that cost at the moment, and they would continue to have that cost with a new playground.
Okay, I think it was Councillor McCracken and then Councillor Bell, Councillor Hart.
Can I just get an understanding? Look, $300,000, or even what I'm suggesting, $235,000 is a lot of money. Some people can build a house for that sort of thing, or a structure. Why is this so expensive?
Through the Mayor, I guess the perception that it's expensive is relative. they are the typical costs of place-based development. That's what contractors charge for developments of this nature, and we're very confident in those estimates from the costs that we've seen come in for similar developments. Memorial Square, for instance, is over $600,000 as a project, and this is a larger space. We're pretty confident that $300,000 is very much the lower end of the scale of what is required to develop a play space in this setting.
Okay. Where do we go? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure who I'm directing this question to. I'm assuming it's right, but I just wanted to... I know Councillor Costin was referring to a maintenance ongoing cost, but in reference to the $17,000 per year in 0.6, is that going to stay the same regardless if the budget is reduced to $235,000? Is that... So in other words, are the costs staying? I think they're staying the same in its current...
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Basically, that's a renewal cost. That's the total project cost divided by the lifespan of the asset. So if you reduce the total project cost divided by 20, we've used that figure. So it's that number would reduce a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, that's what I thought. I just wanted to get that rationale.
Okay. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question was around 0.62. I'm wondering if 0.6 should read differently, because my understanding is the calculation of that figure was 1/20th of the amount in 0.4 plus $2,000. So shouldn't 0.6 read 13,750, which would be 11,750, which is 1/20th of the 235, which Councillor Bell pretty much got there. He just didn't do the calculation. So I'm just wondering if Councillor McCracken might consider that when he moves his resolution, and whether the officers would agree that that would be an accurate figure given the lower capital cost.
I'm happy for that to be changed, given the officers are nodding their heads, yep.
Okay. Okay, Councillor McCracken, you're the mover of this motion. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Hart, is it to be opposed? Councillor Costin? Councillor McCracken as the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess as an educator, I see things a bit differently, and imaginative sort of play spaces are one way of looking at play spaces, but there are a number of different ways of looking at it, and I don't think we should necessarily stick ourselves in one particular way of constructing play spaces. Secondly, the cost for this project is absolutely eye-watering. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a grant that's 100% from someone else. It's still taxpayer money that eventually we've got to maintain or make a contribution towards maintaining. An allocation of $75,000 for a water play area of some description is just unbelievable. I mean, you can get a really, really nice car for that, or you can construct sheds and many different items. For $300,000, someone could get quite a comfortable house. I just cannot believe that this is costing so much money when it's going to be used for 33 kids at maximum. The Memorial Square play space, which is one of the premier spots in our town, Colac, is $600,000, and that's got application to many, many different people. It's open to the public generally. We're spending half of that, which has a very, very narrow sort of catchment. So I think at least one of the costs we should limit to at least some extent, and that might help reduce the maintenance as well. Yeah, it is really just quite staggering how much these costs are. And in terms of just being responsible managers of funds, we've got an obligation to make sure that we get good value for money. We know that the indicative budget for this, which councillors had access to in a councillor briefing, indicated that these figures were sort of, well, they're indications. They're they're not exactly firm. So what we get for $75,000, we're not even sure what that is. So I don't see why it's any different to say $10,000 versus $75,000. So I think, you know, as much as we might say, look, young people in the development is important, absolutely it is. But I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that we are responsible for managing ratepayers' money here, and, you know, maybe it may not be necessarily ratepayers' money funding this, but it's taxpayer money. And just because someone else is paying for it doesn't mean that we can just abrogate our responsibilities to be fair-minded and responsible with this allocation of funds. So, you know, I'm still not entirely comfortable with what's up there, but it's better than what it was.
Councillor Hart as the seconder.
Yeah, I'll reserve. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Costin, you oppose.
Thanks, Mayor. We have looked at this project before, and it was the proposed cost was substantially higher, and we have cut it back. So we are looking at grant funds. If we don't take up these grant funds, they'll just go somewhere else. So we're not achieving anything by not taking up the full amount that we can here. So grant funds are a gift to us, but when you look a gift horse in the mouth, you always look at the ongoing costs of this, and the ongoing costs are fairly small. I don't want to give a lecture on net present value, but the way we've calculated our total life cycle costs is incorrect. 300,000 in 20 years' time is not worth 300,000 in today's dollars. It's much, much less. So our costs per year from now on are of the order of about 2,500. So it's quite cheap. And the majority of the costs will be paid for by the kindergarten operator as well. To reduce the amount from 300,000 to 235,000, I just think is a bit petty. Let's take the 300,000. If we're successful in an application, of course.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell, then Councillor White.
Thanks, Mayor, and I've still had my microphone on, sorry. I'm still finding this one really difficult to judge, to be honest. I'd, in the ideal world, like a bit more time to consider it. I can't do that though, can I? I understand, and I take Graham's point. Like, this money's going to go somewhere, regardless if we take it or not, and whether or not we have an obligation as a council to manage taxpayer money generally, I'm not so sure. I think, you know, yes, we do, but is it relevant to this project? I'm not so sure. Can we build what we're intending to build with a reduced budget? I still don't know the answer to that. It feels like maybe not. I'm just going to have to consider this for the next couple of minutes probably, but I'm not comfortable basically where we're standing with it at the moment, and I just wanted to put that out there.
Councillor White.
Mayor. I just want to say that in the briefing that was brought before us, it was a very comprehensive briefing with a high-level concept plan that gave us an indicative idea of what it would cost. It does seem a lot of money, but clearly we've got very experienced and knowledgeable officers who understand why these costs are such and have done a lot of research around that. My understanding is the building block grants are in blocks of 500,000 and 300,000. Is that correct? And I agree with Councillor Costin. Why wouldn't we go for the 300,000 and really develop something of great quality for kids in our community, and often kids who are vulnerable? I think it's really important that we maximise these opportunities as a council on behalf of our community, on behalf of those kids, and do the very, very best we can. I would never argue about how we use money, and we always need to be responsible and accountable with how we use money. But I have trust in how the officers have undergone the research around this, and it is a high-level concept plan. The next step is to submit and get the funding and then do some really good work around maximising our dollars and ensuring that we get the best for those dollars. So I think we should go for the 300,000 and really do the best we can. That's what's on offer. As a council, we should take that opportunity and really try and maximise this opportunity.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart, you reserve.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to commend Councillor McCracken for his alternative resolution. I think he raises an important point that it's all too easy to spend public money when it's seen as a gift, but it is public money, and the amount of 300,000, as Councillor McCracken rightly points out, you could build a very good house for that, and in fact you could even build a very good house for the 235,000 that he has here. He hasn't said we don't spend anything. I think it's an issue with people who make decisions on expending government money, that it's very easy to say, oh well, it's going to be given to us from someone else, and this is how these decisions are made time and time again. I know it's important that there's adequate and sufficient and good equipment for the kindergarten. I agree with that. This motion is not to spend zero, it's to spend $235,000 instead. This brings a memory back to me when we were discussing this water play, and I remember when I was in primary school, I can still remember that, and I know we're talking about kindergartens, not primary schools, but when we wanted to go down to a water feature, the students were taken down to the local lake. Well, guess what? There's a lake in Colac. Guess what? There's a creeks in Colac. I really think you have to wonder, when we discuss issues like affordable housing, as we did earlier, some people can't afford to have a place to live, and here we are arguing against spending $235,000 because the argument is we should spend $300,000. When, back in primary school, we went down the lake, we didn't expect public money to be spent to recreate a water feature at the school. We took advantage of the natural features that exist, the same natural features that exist in and around Colac. And the problem is, I'm guessing this is going to be voted down, is that too many public representatives throughout the whole country, it's not just local council, just say, oh well, we're going to get the money from someone else. And then you see that important issues such as social housing are unfunded. The cumulative effect of decisions to just spend and spend and spend because someone else is giving us the money. Well, it doesn't come from nowhere. Ultimately, the taxpayers, somewhat ironically, even taxpayers who are having difficulty paying for their own home, are probably going to be indirectly contributing to a higher cost in this. I think $235,000 is more than sufficient for this sort of playground.
Okay, Councillor McCracken, you have a right of reply.
Thank you. With respect, Councillor Costin, you did say that this was petty squabbling over $75,000. I respectfully disagree, because $75,000 is a lot of money, and to think that what use that could be put to, many community members would say that it would be put to a many great amount of uses. But I want to make the point very clear. I'm not saying that we don't do anything here. I'm not saying that we don't renew this space. I'm just saying let's do it in a financially responsible way. Why don't we actually have a bit more of a closer look at, what this water space actually is? Because we actually asked for a breakdown of the costs at the briefing, and you probably remember that, Councillor White. We did ask for a breakup of the cost. I haven't seen it. I don't know if you have, but it certainly hasn't been presented. So I find it really difficult to make a decision on this sort of level expenditure when we don't even have a breakdown of those costs of quite a significant aspect of this project. Need I remind everyone that this benefits at maximum 33 people. The memorial play space benefits an entire community, plus those that are coming through town. Just because something is got an indicative budget doesn't mean that you have to spend it all either. Just because a grant's available for a certain amount doesn't mean that you have to apply for it all. It's like going and borrowing money from a bank. Well, just because your credit limit's $500,000 doesn't mean you have to max it out. You can go for less, and we can still get a good result for our young people. So let's act in a responsible financial way rather than just spending money because it's there. Let's actually make sure that we get value for money for a good purpose, for a purpose that actually, might actually meet some of our targets. I mean, this council has spoken quite at length about being financially sustainable and the problems associated with that. Here we've got an opportunity and we're going to, by the looks of it, ignore it. You can't have it both ways.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion's defeated 2-5. Okay, councillors. No one foreshadowed a motion. We're done.
Did a councillor foreshadow an alternative motion in the event this was lost? We're done.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I seek your leave and indulgence of other councillors to move as a motion the original officer's recommendation.
Is it to be seconded? Councillor White, is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken. All right, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. We've heard some good discussion in relation to costs, in relation to the potential renewal of the play space at Winifred Nance, and I support those concerns. But in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, maximum 5 years' time, we've got to find this money to renew the space. And if there's no government handouts or nothing at the time, it's got to come out of our budget. This is an opportunity to secure new equipment for this kindergarten. It's hopefully, if we're successful, can be delivered well under budget. An issue with fixing a price now is, and I think some councillors here have had experience with this, cost overruns, things going wrong and over budget. And if we had a figure and that occurs, that money has to come out of our budget. So the state and federal governments recognise the importance of early years development. We are obliged to renew this equipment sooner or later. Here is an opportunity to take advantage of some government funding and to do so. I hope we have to give some money back because we didn't spend it all. I hope there's Australian-made product and local businesses may be involved in this if we're successful. But I urge the councillors to consider supporting this and securing the money for the play space.
Councillor White is the seconder.
Reserve.
Councillor McCracken, you oppose?
Look, I do oppose reluctantly because I do support outcomes for our young people. I mean, obviously I work in that space as an educator, I have done for nearly a decade now. So I do understand that there is an importance for early childhood development. It goes without saying. But I don't think that's the argument here today. And my argument is certainly not about spending nothing. My argument is more so about spending less and being wiser with the resources that might be available to us. I think we've really got to face the big challenge at this council about spending money without appropriate sort of governance arrangements around it. I want to make sure that we've got the checks and balances to make sure that we've got, an appropriate dispersal of funds. We've got some sort of indicative budget around this, but if we can't get a breakdown of $75,000, which was requested, how can you really be sure that we're going to get something for this? Honestly. This council has spent a lot of time talking about financial sustainability. Here's an opportunity to at least address it in some way and make sure that we're, good custodians of public funds and get value for money, but it doesn't seem to be a priority, and it's a great disappointment.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. It's, as I said earlier, it's a really difficult one, this one. And I understand the objections that Councillor McCracken and Councillor Hart put forward. Ordinarily, I would say that I'd agree with them, and I might have had a different decision. It would have been a good opportunity to discuss what that gap of 75 grand could have gone to. I think in previous alternative motions we have done that, and we've talked about as a group where the benefit might be within the community. But I think in this case the context is slightly different. It's not coming from within our internal budget. We're seeking the money through a grant. We don't have the luxury of doing that. I have seen in the past in government that if you don't utilise your full availability of a grant, next time around you have difficulty getting the same amount of money. It's a strange concept, but it's reality. That is part of the reason why I will support this. I think it's there. There's an opportunity. We take it and we build the infrastructure. And we have a benefit to the community. The costs are not necessarily overly different year on year, although as Councillor Hart did point out, they are different. So yeah, I'll support this, but as I said, I'm troubled by it to an extent, but I'll support it.
Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Potter, for moving this motion, getting us back on track. Those early years, 0 to 5, are critical for children's development. If I recall the number correctly, 90% of a child's brain develops by the age of 5. Though I might have that wrong, because I think my brain's going the other way at the moment. To look at 300,000 and to try and save 75,000 from that, I just see as false economy. If we give it up, the money's going to go somewhere else. We can't spend it on anything else. We're just going to lose 75,000. We're going to lose 75,000 we can't spend on our young kids, our kids in kindergarten. And we need to do the best we can for those kids, because that's the critical period of their development. And as far as the water play area goes, look, I'm a former director of water authorities, and I'd like to think that a water play area might stimulate some young child there to be the next CEO of Bowen Water. Thank you.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I really struggle with this because I think it's important that there is something applied for. But here we go again, spending 300,000 rather than 235,000 because the actually extra $65,000 is available. I think it's a problem through allocation of public funds across the state and probably the country. And I'll probably reluctantly support this, but it's really under a form of protest that I can and still support it, that we are put in the corner this way, both by grant rules and by the way matters are presented. As Councillor Bell pointed out, from my understanding of what he was saying, he would have liked to have an opportunity to perhaps discuss the issue and teased it out. But that's not to be. It's pretty much a take it or leave it. So I don't appreciate the way some of these things are handled, and this one is one such example. And it's not $65,000 that came from nowhere, it's $65,000 extra of public money. And yes, in one sense, Councillor Costin is right. The fact that there's no way to allocate that somewhere else, it'll just get swallowed up who knows where, does create the temptation that this council's will succumb to in a moment.
I'll just make a quick comment. I support this application. I just want to make note that, yes, we're spending public money. It is the public's money going back to the public. And our community is the public, and if there's money up for grabs for our community, particularly for a play space, we've heard from the officers that around $300,000 is probably the minimum that we need to get a half-decent play space. I agree with the comments made by Councillor Costin of the importance of those early years, and play spaces have changed a lot over the years, and nature play is the way that play spaces are going. Not every kid is lucky enough to be able to sort of hang out at Lake Colac or hang out at the beach or hang out at the creek. Winifred Nance is in one of our more disadvantaged areas of Colac. There are probably kids that just don't have those sorts of advantages, and kinder, is a critical time in a child's life. And I must admit, having two young boys myself, I know the importance of those early years and those times at kinder and pre-kinder. So I fully support this funding, and I hope it gets up. Councillor, who was the seconder? Councillor White.
I think it's all been said, really. Thanks, Mayor. Just to restate the value of play, it just cannot be overstated, the value of play for children. And yes, we are reinvesting public money in our community. I want to be clear that this isn't a water feature that people are talking about. It's a play space, a nature space. It's not a fountain or a water feature. It's quite different to that. I think the briefing was very good and very clear about what was in front of us. There was an opportunity to go for $500,000. We thought that wasn't such a good idea. That was eye-watering. So we said, no, let's look at something and take it back to the $300,000. So we have considered what is appropriate, and we have considered what we can get for that $300,000. I think the officers have done a terrific job in building that high-level concept plan that is so important to even submit for the funding. We haven't got the funding yet. We need to submit for the funding, and we need a really solid submission to even get us considered. So I just want to congratulate the officers. I think they've done a great job with that, and I think it's very clear about what's been in front of us. The key stakeholders have been consulted about what sort of play spaces they want. They're the ones whose children, the educators know what kids need, and it has changed. So I really want to support this, and let's get the best we can for these kids in our community.
Councillor Potter, right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. I think Councillor White is right. It's probably all been said now. Just something Councillor Hart said. I was fortunate to grow up in Colac and used to spend a bit of time at the lake when I was little, until my brother fell in and nearly drowned. And I really don't think it's a good look for a teacher to take 33 toddlers down to play alongside the lake. Something I neglected to point out, Mayor, was the work by officers, in particular a couple of officers, Matty Bissett and John Dodds, I think it was, doing some of the initial design and preparatory work. They have talents in this area, and it's good to see those talents being put to this use, because that actually saved us money from the start. So thanks, staff, for that work. I'd like to see more of that sort of happening, utilising the talents of staff to save council money, to prepare documents and applications to take advantage of these grants. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Are the items carried 6-1? Okay, now we move to item 10.8, contract 2128, construct only, King Track Bridge over Gellibrand River, Chapel Vale. The purpose of this report is to approve and award contract 2128, construct only, King Track Bridge over Gellibrand River, Chapel Vale. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. I know we're just talking about the contract at the moment, but I understand the owner's contributing to the cost of this bridge?
Through the Mayor, that's correct. There is a local resident there who has contributed funds towards the construction of the bridge.
And I'm aware that there's a couple of other bridges around and there'll be more in the future. So we look into the future, we will be required to spend quite a bit on bridges that serve only a few landholders. Do we have a policy or anything, a guideline on owner contributions?
Through the Mayor, thanks for the question. No, to the best of my knowledge, we don't. As Colac Otway Shire, my understanding yesterday, I was having a discussion on a different issue with a former councillor from the Otway Shire, and apparently back in those days, a quarter of a century ago, they did have a policy on exactly this issue. But to the best of my knowledge, we don't. I think that that's something that council might, or that the issue of this expensive infrastructure provision for one or two properties, I think that that's something that council might turn its mind to over the next year or so.
Thanks, Tony. Quarter of a century ago, you're making me feel old. And so it would be worth having a policy. Is it worth putting an extra dot point in there that council prepares a policy on owner contributions?
Through the Mayor, I think it's probably a separate issue to the awarding of this contract, but it's something that's, if you like, it's on our radar, so it won't fall off the table.
Okay, leave it for the moment then.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, councillors. The officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Potter, you move that motion up on the screen. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Bell. Okay, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to move this motion. It's really an operational matter in a way, but the difficulty is we're spending a lot of money, and I get that, but we have to spend it. And this contract's undergone the correct scrutiny, and it's been reviewed, and really we've got no option but to do this. And I thank the officers for their work.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to support this, and thank you, officers, for your work. I think I've actually pretty confident I've done an environmental impact assessment for this site. It's quite a interesting site, and I've done at least one other similar site investigation for a bridge that may or may not come across our desk, but there probably is scope for tightening up some of the policies around what happens with this public-private sort of overlap. I've got a feeling this particular example might be one where, until recently at least, cows used to go across this, milking cows used to go across this bridge. Is that still happening? Anyway, the point is that the job's got to be done. It's a lot of money, so I think we probably do need to look at something that outlines, a better approach going forward. But yeah, support it for now, of course.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I do want to, in supporting this, which is essentially awarding a contract, I do want to draw attention to page 174 and 175 of the agenda, that whilst there might be one private property owner, it is used by the Department for Firefighting and other operations in the area. It's useful for firefighting as enables crews to maintain a northerly fire front and retreat to the south, as well as providing access to a property owner. So I think it's just important to, in discussion, to understand that it's not just access for one property owner, it does serve other purposes.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.9, road reconstruction contracts, 2119 McLaughlin Street, Apollo Bay, 2124 Stewart Street, Colac, 2200 Strawn Street, Birregurra, and 2203 Forest Street, Colac. The purpose of this report is to approve and award contracts 2119, 2124, 2200 and 2203 for road reconstruction projects. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Hart.
Mayor, I wonder if we could move all these, unless someone wants to pull it out to object to, whether we could move them all as one supersised resolution.
Good idea. Yeah, a supersize. Yep. Yep, okay. Is it the seconder, Councillor Potter? Is it to be opposed? Okay, Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, Mayor, first of all, these are important construction projects, and I've had a look at the different paperwork, so I'm satisfied to support these various recommendations. I do note that I did raise the point that I think these recommendations should be separated, and I think they should be provided on the agenda as separate resolutions. And I think the reason for that is if there was some particular reason why someone didn't agree with one of the recommendations but agreed with the others, they could deal with that. But in the absence of any objections on this occasion, I think we can deal with all these different contracts at once, and I think that's the way to handle it. But I still do think, as a general principle, they should be presented in agendas as they have today, which is a series of separate contracts.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I was going to say the same thing that Councillor Hart said, actually. I support the way it's been presented to it by officers. I thank them for their work, but I think it allows councillors to discuss each one individually, or, as Councillor Hart did do, was supersise the motion. So, thanks.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Okay, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Councillors, we might just have a quick 5-minute break. Just so... Yeah, we'll have a 5-minute break. Yeah. Okay, councillors, we might get going. Now we move to item 10.10, two-way radio bank funding finalisation and hardware disposal. The purpose of this report is to provide council with the information to enable them to make a decision to finalise the bank contract for the two-way radio equipment and to dispose of the two-way radio hardware. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just want to make sure that I've understood information that we've been provided through the Chief Executive Officer. My understanding is if we support this resolution, the Bank of Queensland would have spent or paid out approximately $798,000, perhaps $798,228, and they would have received from council about $1,050,902. There was a table sent around. Would that? I probably don't want to argue about the $2 or the $8, but is that pretty much the figures?
So through the Mayor, yes, they are the correct figures, Councillor Hart.
Are there any other questions? No. Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor... Councillor Hart, mover? Councillor McCracken, seconder. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think it's well known I've had a few things to say about these two-way radios, but I do note the answer that the Chief Executive Officer gave to a question of the public earlier today, that there will be a review by the CEO of this matter. I know it's in progress, and so there's more to come on that side of things. I mean, there's no denying that the being about $1 million down, which is roughly the net figure, give or take, is a very poor outcome, and I'm aware that the CEO's paying attention to that. But what we're dealing with today is, I guess you can describe it as the best outcome salvaged from a bad situation. And that is that if we agree to this resolution, we pay the amount owed to Bank of Queensland in one hit and get it's called a discount. I mean, it's a lower cost than if we paid it off. So a savings to that cost, and that we dispose of the two-way radios finally and get some money back from those. So I do acknowledge particularly Mr Errol Lawrence's work in working through the maze of issues on this side of the part, and I'm not going to spend too much time grumbling about the waste of $1 million today, because I note we are going to get a review from the CEO, but I will draw attention to this. The Bank of Queensland would have paid on council's behalf around $798,000. They will get back from council, even with this discount, $1,050,902. The Bank of Queensland will still make a profit of $252,000. Let's round it off, call it $250,000. And they're entitled to that because council entered into a contract. But the point I make with the difference between a conventional loan and this arrangement that council entered into, and we've now found, it's been disclosed, in fact, in the annual report, that the arrangement wasn't visible to councillors when they made, this contract with Bank of Queensland was entered into. It's on page 156 of the annual report that was published recently. That had this been a conventional loan, and people would be familiar with the housing loans, if you pay your house off, you stop paying interest. Whereas with this sort of loan, and it is similar to hire purchase, as I've said before, all the costs are added up front, all the predetermined financing costs are added up front, And that's why you get to the situation when if you pay it off early, you only make a very limited savings from that. It's the structure of this loan that has contributed to the high cost of this. And it is also the structure of this arrangement that led to the safeguards that do exist in a council's accounting department would have picked up the authorisation of payments when goods hadn't been delivered. Would have picked that up. We've established that from a whole lot of documents that I know you, Mayor, and Councillor Potter and I, and they've been provided to others, have looked through. So we can't lose sight of the core issue here, and I'll say it again in another forum when we're talking about this to the CEO. The core issue here is this different financing arrangement with Bank of Queensland. Had the liquidation occurred without that, then much of this high cost would not have been incurred. It would have been pretty much an inconvenience. Everything comes back to this unusual, or this financing arrangement which is unusual for Colac Otway Shire. Everything. The liquidation, really, the liquidation helped us to find out what happened. It highlighted it to us. To us, I mean councillors.
Councillor McCracken.
Thank you, Mayor. I echo the points that Councillor Hart made, and I don't want to repeat them, but I do want to acknowledge Councillor Hart for the work that he's put in as well, and I know you spent many, many hours looking over it almost with a microscope, and you might even spent more time on it than some officers maybe. But I know you put a lot of time into this, Stephen, so I think you deserve a lot of the credit for bringing this to the public and for them to see it for what it actually is, including the lack of transparency around the financing arrangements. So I think we owe Councillor Hart a great deal of gratitude for that. I guess the point I want to make is sort of one that's almost a theme of tonight, is that this really does highlight the need for financial accountability and making sure that we do have very strong controls over how we spend public money, and making sure that we have proper reporting arrangements and processes in place so that things don't happen like this. And we've been given an assurance that this is going to come back to us at some point in the future for a more broader ranging discussion about what went wrong and what are the learnings. So I won't go on too much about it now, but I just want to say it does highlight the importance of having those robust systems in place, which I'm led to believe are being implemented or have been looked at being implemented. So we'll have more to say when we see the full report.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, this report informs councillors and the community virtually the final wash-up of what's been a disappointing outcome in a process that was designed to improve staff safety and efficiency. So the intent of what officers and councils set out to do was pure. It's just, unfortunately, it's come undone. But nevertheless, here we are with all the details and the information in front of the community, demonstrating again that this council is determined to be open and transparent and not try and hide anything from the public, especially if things go wrong. I'd too like to congratulate Mr. Lawrence for an outcome he's managed to secure in relation to the sale of those portable radios. Much better result than I thought could be achieved, so well done on that. And this scenario has been picked apart really over the last 12 months by a previous CEO and the current CEO, and also by councillors. And I'd like to thank the Mayor for chairing an internal committee comprising of Councillor Hart, myself, the CEO, and Marlo from governments. And Marlo did a ton of work on this, and every time councillors wanted some information or another report, or there must be an email about this somewhere, go and find it. she did a lot of work on that. So thanks for that, Marlo. There will be another report coming to us, final wash-up, just to explain to councillors what processes that we've improved, the new procedures in place, so this can't happen again. And just like to apologise for the ratepayers for a costly outcome, but this was brought about at the end of the day by a subcontractor or supplier going broke. And unfortunately, this is not uncommon in business, and sometimes it's hard to avoid or impossible to avoid under most circumstances.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.11, the communications policy. The purpose of this report is for Council to adopt the updated communications policy following community consultation. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Marg. Councillor White.
I asked this earlier and just interested, communication is so important in how we get our messages out to the community, and there's so many different mediums these days, and I think the idea of a newsletter and a database, email database, is a really good one. I note that it's not included in this at the moment, but that I'd just like to ask, is that on the radar, and what's the plans for something like that?
Through the Mayor, thanks Councillor White. Yes, we agree it would be a great asset to our communications to the community to have that, and we'll look at resourcing that. In the meantime, we'd encourage the community to subscribe to our latest news page on the website, because that's updated with media releases and also the council news that's published in the paper each week.
Are there any other questions? No. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor McCracken. Recommendation. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? Okay, Councillor McCracken is the mover. Councillor Costin? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Okay, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Items carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.12, Councillor Code of Conduct. The purpose of this report is to issue the Councillor Code of Conduct for public consultation following councillor review. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No. Okay. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Hart. Councillor White as the seconder. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart as the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. This recommendation is that the Code of Conduct goes out for public consultation, so the public may make comment if they want to. This arose from when the Code of Conduct was adopted quite some time ago, early in this term of council. It had to be adopted quite quickly without public comment to meet various Local Government Act deadlines, and what we're doing now, we've had another look at it. There's no proposed changes, but this will give the public an opportunity to comment on the Code of Conduct if they want to, which was lacking previously due to the deadlines that we had to operate under to meet the Local Government Act.
Councillor White?
Just to echo Councillor Hart, but also to point out that it's actually not a requirement to put it out for public consultation, but we have chosen to do that, and I think that's a really positive move. And again, it demonstrates that council does want to engage with the community and get community feedback. So I think that's a really positive move, and I think it was something that one of our community members also suggested way back when. So I'd just like to say that I think that's a positive move and we move on with it.
Does any other councillor wish to comment? Right, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.13, review of Council's public transparency policy and governance rules. The purpose of this report is to approve the revised public transparency policy and governance rules for the purpose of public consultation. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Costin.
We're putting out the Code of Conduct policy for public exhibition, and this is proposed to go out as well. Will they all go out together, or are we sort of staging this and so that we're not overloading the public with requests for submissions on various policies all at once?
Through you, Mayor, the intention is to hold a submissions hearing if anyone wishes to talk to a written submission at the same time. So we would plan it so that the Code of Conduct, the public transparency policy and the governance rules would all be considered together.
Are there any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor McCracken, Councillor Potter as the seconder. Okay, is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken. Councillor Potter, no. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor White, then Councillor Hart.
I would just say, as a new councillor in the last 12 months, and I just want to comment on the amount of work that's involved in reviewing documents like this and getting sort of a shared understanding of what we want out of a policy like this and how important it is to have a transparency policy. It's pretty dense at times, but it's been some really good work and we've all had opportunity to have input. So I'd just like to say I think it's been good work and really important work. Thank you.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I echo the comments of Councillor White, but I also add to people who are looking at these documents, the governance rules, which is part of this, are the rules that basically outline how meetings such as these are run. There's a good summary of the changes on page 271, 272, 273 and 274. Some of the changes are quite minor. Special meeting, for example, there's no such thing defined in the current Local Government Act, but we still can hold those meetings. I think they're called something else, and that's a sort of change in some parts. There'll still be a question time proposed for the renamed special meetings, and I can't remember what they're called at the moment. Unscheduled meetings, yes. But those questions will only be on the particular agenda, which is currently what the case was for the special meetings. But there's a whole list of changes there. I think councillors probably rather I didn't go through them all. And I encourage the public to have a look at it, and if they've got any concerns or comments to send them in during the submission period.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.14, appointments to committees and external organisations. The purpose of this report is to appoint council representatives to committees and external organisations. Do councillors have any questions? No. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Potter, is it to be seconded? Councillor White, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Potter is the mover. No. Councillor White? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.15, Council Meeting and Planning Committee Dates 2022. The purpose of this report is to consider the dates, times and venues for meetings of the Council and its Planning Committee for 2022. Do councillors have any questions? No. Councillor Hart.
Yes, Mayor. I understand it was more suitable for some to attend a 4 p.m. planning committee meeting and some other changes. Is there an alternative resolution or a different resolution? When you're ready, I'm happy to move it.
Okay.
Mayor.
All right, Councillor Hart is going to move that motion. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Bell, is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Hart is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. This sets the dates for the various meetings and changes the time for the planning meeting to 4 p.m, which is what it once was, as that works better for some people. There's also some other changes. I wonder if I may ask that be rolled. Yeah, that's better. For many years, as far back as I can remember in relation to council, and I found some paperwork going back to 2007, although I believe it was probably back to last century, that councils held at least 2 meetings in Apollo Bay each year. So point 3 certainly encourages council, the CEO, to take all reasonable steps to do that at dates to be determined, and also notes that nothing in this resolution is intended to prevent meetings being held in other locations. I'm not suggesting to force the issue in tonight's debate, but I do ask that perhaps council might contemplate whether there is a council meeting from time to time in other areas. There used to be meetings 1 a year in Birregurra. Other times, I think the previous council met in Biak and Forest. So point 4 is just pointing out that we haven't ruled that out, although I know that there's different views about holding meetings outside Colac.
Councillor Bell, you're the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. And I think it's potentially only myself who's had a bit of an issue in recent times with the 2 p.m. time slot. So I hope it's of no great convenience to anyone else who's, if this is supported, that are going to be put out by it. I really do appreciate this. It's going to make my Wednesday a lot easier when it's council, or any council day, really. So I do, thank you all for that.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you for the insertion of the meetings in Apollo Bay. We're much appreciated by those who live down there to have the opportunity to talk to their local councillors and to ask questions directly rather than just submit questions in writing, but to ask them at a council meeting. And I hope that we take the opportunity to time those meetings when there are coastal related matters on the agenda, and not just Apollo Bay, but Wye River right through to Lavis Hill even. So that's, I'm pleased to see that amendment in there. Thank you.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.16, report of informal meetings of councillors. Please note that the purpose of this item is to report the informal meetings of councillors and does not require a council decision. Thank you, councillors. That concludes this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire. I declare this meeting closed.